Hey everybody, welcome back to Power Apps and Coffee. I am still Tim. It's good to be back. Sorry for the brief absence. Today we are going to revisit DevOps Day. And while last time I did say we completed our journey, there was one component missing from our solution of true DevOps in the Power Platform that I've been wanting to add now for a while, and that is flow. So in today's episode, we are going to explore adding a flow to our solution and incorporating it into our pipeline. And by the end of this episode, I'll probably convince you that you just don't want to do it. So let's go. Okay, for this episode, we're going to use the same Power App that we used in the environment variables DevOps episode. So if you need to see how the environment variables were established and built into the pipeline, please go revisit that video first. I have it up here. Now, we're not going to make changes to the Power App. Instead, I have this up just to remind you that I do have environment variables built into this Power App. And to me, if you are going to add a flow into CI/CD for Power Apps, you're going to want to use the environment variables for the same reason you're going to use them in a Power App. So just wanted to show here what we have and that we actually have that. And that's it for the Power App. We're not going to be concerned about it anymore because that hasn't changed. Again, we're going to add a flow. Now, flows, if you're like me, flows are generated, of course, by going to the flow suite. You build a flow, you do what you need to do. Me personally, I like to build the flows independently of my Power Apps and just associate them by their relationship within an environment. I have friends who will generate the flow from the Power App environment. For example, like build a button, click, say build a flow. And I'm not a fan of that, but still irrelevant of how you build them, because if you build them in either of those two ways, you're going to find out that you can't use them in a pipeline. So to show you how a flow is added into a solution such that it can be part of your CI/CD pipeline and use the environment variables, we're going to go here into our solutions area. Clicking solutions. So here we see that we have the three things we left off with. We have the Power App itself, we have the list, and then we have the site as our environment variables. For right now, that's been great. Now, to add a flow to CI/CD, like I had mentioned before, you can't just add an existing flow, even though it does say here, automation flow. In order to use environment variables, the flow has to be aware of them, and therefore you have to start in the solution. Okay, so what we want to do is add a flow from our solution. To do that, we go here, we go automation, cloud flow, and we want it automated. Here, of course, like any other flow interface, we want to pick a trigger, so we're going to say when an item is created, because right now everything we have is in SharePoint. We hit create. And we have what we're used to seeing in flow. Now we want to be able to add our environment variables. And so we have our site and our list. We see right now we don't have that. So in order to add a environment variable, we come into custom value and we don't have an option. There's a fun thing about these particular flows that the triggers, and if we were to come here and add in SharePoint as an operation, say an easy get items. When we create a flow using an automated flow, we may have our full list, but when we enter a custom variable, we do not see any dynamic content. Turns out, in order to do this, we have to go automation, cloud flow, instant. And from instant, we want to manually trigger a flow. So this is annoyance number one. Number two, actually. One, we have to create it in the solution. And two, I'll show you why. So we have manually can trigger a flow. Now if we add new step and we bring up our SharePoint connectors, and we're going to do our get items now, we go through the same steps, and in this case we want to select our site, hit enter custom value, and now we have dynamic content. And then look, our very welcome to see brown icons now appear. So we can choose our site for Power Apps test data. We can come into list name, and again we have our random data list test. Those were the two environment variables we used in our previous example. But this doesn't help me. I don't need a manually triggered flow. In order to fix that, we will come in here and we will delete our trigger, and now we'll go back and put a new one in based around SharePoint. So we come back here, SharePoint, and we will see when an item is created here. And now we can, in much the same way we just did, select our custom value, and then we see our environment variable, and do the same for list name. So yeah, we have to build it in a solution, and then we can only use this one type of trigger, which we have to then delete and re-add. Not fun, I will admit. Not what I like. But right now, that's the way this seems to work. We will name our flow. We will hit save. We go back and boom. Now we're not done yet. This gets us the flow that is true, but there is an extra piece that we need to make sure we have. So if we go to our flow and we go to advanced and add required objects, it will go and find what it is we need to add. So we click OK, it's going to do look, and here shortly we should have our fifth item, and we do. Let me put me back. This is a connection reference. Now, if you remember in the previous episode, the connection references have been blank up until now. With the addition of flow, we have this connection reference, and what that will link to is the account that the connection is under. So in the case that we have, it would be my address because I started the account, and that's what the connection is based off of. So, but this is one new thing that we're going to have to add. So we will note here, I want you to see something, that under status we see that the flow is turned on. The next annoyance we're going to have, that we're going to see once this gets to production, is that this is off by default. And so CI/CD will not be as smooth as you like. However, we now have a complete solution, so we're going to go ahead and go back to our solutions list, and we're going to build that. So we see here we have to publish all customizations, and this will essentially build and package our solution. Now we're doing this because in our pipeline we need our deployment settings file, and to get that, of course, we need the solution package file. This will take a minute, but when it comes back we will again show how we get that particular file and look at some of the changes that we need to make. We see our publish is done. We'll go ahead and export this. We did our publish already, so we'll go ahead and hit export. Again, I'm just doing it as unmanaged. We see we're up to version 10 and export. Okay, we have it. Let's go ahead and minimize this really quick. We have our file. Now, if we go to Visual Studio Code, I have here an old version. So the old version of our deployments file, as it came out in the last episode, looks a lot like this. And we see we have our two environment variables, and between their names and then what the value will be in production. Now we're going to have connection references, which here is blank. So the first thing we are going to need to do is come down here, and for those again who remember the last episode, this pack command, it will extract our deployment settings file from our solution. So we have solution version 10. We hit enter. We have our file, deployment settings JSON, and we will open that. So now you see we have our connection reference, and 2/3 of this is populated. Now, what do we do with this? Leaving that blank will not help us. What we need is the ID of the production connection. So this is what are we at? 4 now for the annoyance. This is a cart before the horse problem so far. I'm hoping to solve this problem. But at the moment, we need to have the connection deployed to production before this comes in, so we can get that ID value and then put it into the settings file so we can actually run it completely. Now, if we go back to the browser, I'll show you where this comes from. So we are in Power Apps, and we're going to go to our production environment. And under Dataverse, we have connections. Now, if this is run once, that connection will have come over. So again, you're going to have to deploy a pipeline. If for the first time you're going to do this, deploy the pipeline, get the connection, and then prepare another pipeline for your first actual run. We see here we have my account. This will be whichever account you use. And if we go to details, we see here in our URL this. Now, it could be a GUID. There's part, as you see, what I have found so far is environment variables are prefixed with the word shared. We copy that. We go back to Visual Studio Code. Oop, wrong icon. We go back to Visual Studio Code, and we paste that value here into connection ID. Again, not happy, but it is what it is. But this gives us our new deployment settings file. Again, the top part hasn't changed. We are still using the same environment variables as we used the last time. So the instructions to generate this are the exact same. What we care about is this. So I'm going to copy that because I'm not going to go hunt for my values in production just yet, because over here in Azure DevOps, I have my deployment settings file saved in my repo. So again, I store it in the solution name, the settings folder, and I have my deployment settings.json. We see here it is blank. So if we edit this and we come in and simply paste that in place, we've now updated our deployment, and having not disrupted our original one that had the environment variables. Let's go ahead and commit those changes. Oop. Commit. Okay, so our deployment settings are fine. Our solution is built. Now we need to get the solution updated with the flow into source control. So we go back to our pipeline, and now the pipeline and the release have not changed. There are no changes whatsoever. That's the nice part, exception of the deployment settings, of course. So if we just run our pipeline, again, I am in the way. We see we have it queued up, and here in a couple of minutes we will have our source control updated with a solution that includes our flow and, of course, the new connection reference. So let's give that a minute. Okay, we are done. We have a success. We need to go to our release, which again has not changed. Let's go ahead and push this to production. All right. All right, let's give that a minute. Yay, we are done. Okay, let's go back to Power Apps. Now we are in our development environment. Oh, almost forgot. We have to update the owner of our new solution. So again, see the previous episode for this particular script, and that gets us our rights. Boom, boom, done. All right. So now we will see, again, in production, we will have a new solution. Boom, there it is, version 10. So what does that give us? That should give us an app. If we go to apps, we should see it, and there it is. Now, and of course, all the ones that came with Dynamics. But what about our flow? So if we go to flows, we will see that, so we have our app in apps, we have our flow in flows. No. So what's our annoyance count up to now? 5? Yeah. We don't see that our flow is here, and we won't. So if we go to solutions and we go back to variables, let's take a look and see what came with. So we have everything we expected. We have our app, we have our environment variables, we have our connection reference, and we have our flow. First thing, status off. So even though it was on, it is off here. I have worked with PowerShell to see if I could turn it on. This flow, not only is it not in the environment, if we go to flows, it doesn't appear in PowerShell for get flows, even the PNP PowerShell. So this exists only here. If I could get it in PNP PowerShell, I had hoped I could enable it by, again, using a script. Nope. This is set to off. So you have to, in order for this to work, you need to come in here, select it, and turn it on. And it gets better. Let's add to our annoyance list. Every time you publish this from test to production or whatever stage in your CI/CD pipeline, it goes back to off. It just does. I don't know why. So even if it's automated and you want to push this late at night just to get it out the door and with as minimal disruption as you can, you still got to come in here and you have to turn it on. But let's take a look at it since it's here. The only way to see the flow, to do anything about it, is to come in and edit it through the solution. Now we will see here, this only has as an owner, this is the application account in Azure DevOps. We can come in here, we can add whatever users you want to as owners. It doesn't matter in terms of it appearing in any list whatsoever. So anyway, we can go in here, we can hit edit. We can take a look at the flow to prove what came down for us. So we see when an item is created that our environment variables came down as expected. So the flow is there, the flow works great. It just, you're stuck with the solution interface to do anything with it. And again, we can come in here, select it, turn it on, and our flow is enabled. So we see turn on succeeded, and we have on is our status. So yes, now we have a flow that will trigger on a SharePoint trigger event. But again, getting to it, itemizing it, seeing it through PowerShell, through the GUI, all that is limited because you have to know that it's in the solution. Now in production, that may not be as bad a thing because if it's a managed solution, you may not be looking to edit it anyway. But if you're truly trying to get a grasp on where your flows are in your system, the fact that you will have what would hope to be the most important ones, if you cared enough to put this in a pipeline, hidden, does seem to be a bit of a problem. So again, one more reason why I'm really not a fan of this. But that's where it exists. We've proven that it can come in, that we have a flow added to our pipeline, and that it is truly possible to put this together. Again, it's limited to SharePoint. We haven't gotten environment variables away from just SharePoint yet. Dataverse is coming soon. We just don't have a date when. hopefully here soon. But that's the episode. I hope this was helpful. I see now how it works. I don't know if I'm ever going to use it, but I imagine that in certain respects, especially if I'm going to package a solution and ship it out to a third-party client, not in my current job, maybe this is the way to go just to keep things together. But in terms of my day-to-day, I just don't know if it's practical. I'm going to keep looking, see if I can figure out how to get around some of the more nasty parts. But until then, if you use it and you like it, leave me a comment. I'm very curious. If not, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.